Good morning, Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're in our study entitled Recommended Reading, and I would like to recommend that you read the book of James. The book of James, for me, is important because without the book of James, I wouldn't like James very well. Because James does not come off as a figure that's very admirable in the Gospels or in the book of Acts. You don't really know him much except from John's Gospel, where he knows that the Jews are waiting to kill his big brother Jesus and asks Jesus why he doesn't go to Jerusalem. Why doesn't he just go to it's awfully cold the way Jesus's brothers treat him in John's Gospel. I think that's in the 8th chapter. And then in the book of Acts, he is the voice of reason in moderation in Acts chapter 15, but he's also the person in Acts chapter 21 who gets Paul arrested because he's so zealous about Jewish Christians keeping the law that he wants Paul to make all the other Jewish Christians zealous about keeping the law comfortable with his being there. And that's how Paul ends up being arrested. Paul has brought all this money from the collected for the poor saints in Jerusalem, and it's like that's nice, but we really are not comfortable with you being here. So you need to do this so that we'll feel better about you. And then it's James's own emissaries in Galatians 2 that bring about the confrontation between Paul and Peter. Now James wasn't there himself, but still, these are his people causing this turmoil. James is the younger brother of Jesus. And the book of James is just a book that we love so much. And there are a lot of reasons why. I think the main reason why we love the book of James so much is that he has his brother's voice. My little brother and I, Jeff and I, we don't look a thing alike. He looks more like my dad's family. I look like my mom's family. Um, we have a lot of shared interests, but our personalities are so different, and we're so different in so many ways. But his voice sounds exactly like mine over the phone, which caused me a lot of problems when I was a young youth minister, associate minister, and he was still a college student. Anyway, but he could call you, and probably to this day could call you, and pretend to be me, and you would think that you were talking to me because our voices are so similar, particularly over the phone. Um, James's voice is Jesus's voice. It just is. The book of James is based on the Sermon on the Mount. It just is, and you can get a good commentary on the book of James. And when you read the introduction, and I'm not going to take the time to show this to you today, but you can just see the parallels and how James is not just structuring his work on Jesus teaching, particularly as Matthew recorded it in his gospel for a Jewish audience, but on the Sermon on the Mount. So that's one reason. Another reason, and this is connected to the first one, is that his facility with words is like Jesus' facility with words. He says everything in a line or two. He just does. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. How can you improve upon that statement when someone asks you if you should pay your taxes or not? And we have so many of these statements in James's gospel, and James's letter, and I just want to read you two of these. Let me see, verse 27. Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of God is to visit orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself unstained by the world. Do you want to know what Christian living is? It's righteous living, and it's also taking care of each other. Be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, because the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. There's not a single communication textbook that tells you more about communicating than that. Be swift to hear. Shut your mouth and open your ears. Slow to speak. Do not start formulating your answer before you've heard somebody all the way out. Slow to get angry. Don't assume, and don't jump to conclusions, and certainly calm down, because the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. Is there anything else to say to make us better communicators? Uh, James is often seen as being in opposition to the Apostle Paul. They certainly, um, in their tone, take a little bit of a different tone, but there is no disagreement. If Paul says you're saved by faith, and but then he also says for good works. And James will say the same thing. Show me your faith without your works. I'll show you my faith by my works. The works are an expression of faith. They're not a substitute for faith or something we do in addition to faith. They are itself. They are themselves the expression of faith, which is exactly what the Apostle Paul says. We're in Ephesians 2. We're saved by faith, saved by grace through faith. It's the gift of God, not of ourselves, so that we shouldn't boast. For we are his workmanship, created in him for good works. They're saying the exact same thing. He's got that long section on the tongue that reads like something from Paul, when he talks about the tongue and Paul's conversation about love in 1 Corinthians 13, which is so positively communicated. This is a section just like this. If you'd taken this section and stuck it in one of Paul's letters, we would have thought Paul had written it when he talks about the tongue in chapter 3. And there's nothing else that he says that's any different from what Paul says. But there are no run-on sentences with 5 semicolons in them, because he doesn't write the way Paul writes. He writes the way Jesus talks, and so he's just so practical. The wisdom that he gives to us. I call some of these verses, one sentence textbooks. Chapter 3, verse 18, and he uses a word that no one else has ever used before until his brother made the word up in the Sermon on the Mount in verse 18. The seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. That's Jesus' phrase. If you want righteousness and peace, you have to sow those seeds. In other words, you have to invest in those things. You have to plant the seeds, and then you have to wait for them to grow, and you have to cultivate them, and you have to water them, but they have to grow on their own. The fruit, or the seed whose fruit is righteousness, is sown in peace by those who make peace. Another one-sentence textbook about how we achieve, a right and a lasting peace with someone else. It doesn't happen with a handshake. It doesn't happen in a moment. It happens over time when somebody's willing to invest themselves in it, and then tend it and cultivate it and wait for the fruit to appear on the vine. There's just so much wisdom here, and it sounds exactly the way Jesus himself talks. And I would imagine that for people who knew Jesus, if to have this text was almost like having a recording of Jesus back together with them. And I think that's why it's so appealing to us as well. So I would like to recommend that you read the book of James as someone writing very much in the voice of his big brother. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes. The next time we're together, we're going to talk about 1 John. Thank you.